It's the last meeting for a while, and we're going to get done in good orderly fashion.
Yep. Cameras live.
Thank you, Ms. Legault. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the special meeting of the Electoral Area Services Committee of Wednesday, July 29th. I'd like to first begin with some housekeeping and note that we're meeting in various areas of the territories of the Coast Salish peoples. I would just remind everyone that we will, our next board meeting, the material from this meeting, will be going to the September 9th evening meeting of the board. But also note that there will be another Electoral Area Services Committee meeting on Wednesday, September the 2nd. Just like to remind everyone to keep your microphone muted until you're called upon to speak, and that I would ask staff that aren't engaged in a particular item, keep your video and audio muted as well. And with that, I believe we are now at a point where we can go to approval of the agenda. And just before we get started on that, there has been a deletion of the delegations and might be moving a couple of things around. But other than that, could I have a motion to approve the agenda with that deletion noted? Moved by Director Yanni Donardo, seconded by Alternate Director Haim. Any discussions on adoption of the agenda? Seeing none, I will call a question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? I see none opposed. The motion carries. To the next item, I turn to Ms. Legault, the public input period.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have two submissions for public input period today. The first is from Bernard Yearlink. Dear Chair, items C2 and C3, it is my understanding that since there is a regional tourism service function that grants an aid within such a function are not allowed, perhaps I'm wrong. Regarding item INF1, I agree with Dr. Miller. The Coxsila watershed is in dire straits, and it would be foolhardy to allow development that requires tapping into Coxsila groundwater and surface water. Not only is the Coxsila watershed stressed, so are other watersheds in the CVRD, Mill Bay being one such example. Regarding item R3, it would be nice to know how much of the soil was deposited on, for want of a better term, a grace period permit, and whether any of these grace period permits exceeded 1,000 cubic meters being deposited. The second item is from Cliff Evans. Mr. Chair, on today's agenda, R3 is a soil deposition report. It's nice to finally see a report with a few statistics. The report shows the soil deposit function making some money. When the public, truck drivers, and contractors solicited the CVRD for the bylaw, it wasn't about making money, it was about protecting our watersheds and water from a few contractors that were abusing the soil depositing system, contaminating our waters, and destroying our watersheds. Today's report should have in it how many streams and forests have been protected at the new permitted facilities, how much cleaner the streets and working environments are because of newly installed wheel washes and dust control. The Shawnigan Basin Society's water tests and field observations don't indicate that much improvement, but it's a start, and we all knew that the soil deposit bylaw would need amendments with input from contractors, truckers, the CVRD, and the public. The EASC must have all the information for the directors and public, and this includes covenants in writing as per the soil bylaw. The board can prohibit a soil permit. It must not be passed, as stated previously. The Local Government Act Part 10, 335.2 and 3 states, 2, a board may by bylaw regulate and prohibit in relation to a regional district service other than a regulatory service. 3, without limiting Section 2, a bylaw under that subsection may provide for a system of licenses, permits, approvals in relation to a regional district service, including by doing one or more of the following: prohibiting any activity or thing until a license, permit, or approval has been granted. B, providing for the granting and refusal of licenses, permits, and approvals. He also quotes Local Government Act 327, removal of deposit, sand, gravel, and other soil, backs this up. Soil bylaw states 12.1.b, a title search with all registered covenants must be in the application, not a phone call, but in writing. He also quotes Community Charter Division 2 to 10, relationship with provincial laws. 10.1, a provision of municipal bylaw has no effect if it is inconsistent with a provincial enactment, and refers to covenants for conservation purposes, Section 219 of the Land Title Act. A conservation covenant is a voluntary agreement to conserve land or protect features relating to it. It's an agreement between a private landowner and a designated individual or organization registered on the land title and is legally binding on the future owners of the property. A covenant may include provisions that restrict the use of or require that improvements be maintained on the property for the protection, natural, historical, cultural, architectural, environmental, heritage, scientific, wildlife, or plant life values. Section 219, covenants are an inexpensive alternative to crown acquisitions and provide the public with means to preserve land or its special attributes. I hope the CVRD respects the BC land titles, Section 219. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That concludes public input period.
Thank you, Ms. Legault. And that would take us to our next item on the agenda, which is correspondence. And I'd just like to note for everyone, I seem to be having a little bit of technical difficulties with my device that has the agenda on it. So I'm going to do my best to muddle through. I have a paper copy in front of me, but with that, the delegation was deleted from the agenda. I will go to the correspondence. And Ms. Legault, would you like me to read these recommendations? I think that's worked well in the past. Does that work for everyone as well?
Excuse me. Sorry, Mr. Chair. Point of order. Just noticed there was one more public input from Susan Kaufman. I see it on my email.
I believe something came in after the deadline, so we've already moved on past that. So we will go to item number 4, which is correspondence. C1 is a grant aid request, Electoral Area D. Director Smith, you have a point of order?
Is it possible for us to make an opportunity to go back to that public input? Sometimes people have time lags. We're all working through technology that may not enable us to get things there. Is it possible for us to vote to go back and have that public input from Ms. Kaufman?
Well, we do have rules that and policies and procedures to follow, and we can certainly put that on the table for everyone to consider. And I would normally prefer that people send their input out in advance because, quite frankly, information that comes in at the very last minute is perhaps not as useful as material that would have come to us earlier. But I will look around to the committee, maybe through a nod or showing hands. Is anybody interested in going back and hearing that item? So I see. So I'm going to actually ask for a motion to go back to consider that item. Director Wilson, you have your hand up. Would you like to speak?
Yeah, I agree with Director Smith here. These are special times. There are time delays, and we should not stick strictly to the rules, even though they say we cannot do this, we cannot do this. We have to be flexible, and this is one of those times when we should be flexible without quoting rules and regulations.
Okay, so is there anyone else like to make a motion? Director Smith.
So is there a motion on the floor? If there's not, I'd like to make a motion that we return to the public input period for any additional input that has come forward prior to moving on.
So you're making that motion. It looks like there's a seconder. Any discussion on that item? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? That motion carries. Ms. Legault, within the allotted time frame, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just going back to my email here. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. This email is from Susan Kaufman from Satlum. I'd like to provide comment on a number of today's agenda items. One on Delegation 1 is requesting consideration of a cannabis growing outside of industrial zoned lands. Mr. Chair, as this item's been removed from the agenda, I'm just going to pass that.
Please do.
And item 2 is with respect to item R1, development variance permit number DVP 20E04, Jeffreys Road. I'd like to draw attention to the QEP report. The report appears to have been compiled of cut and paste of differing fonts, suggesting that the information has been taken from previous consultations. I'd like to draw your attention to page 6 under the heading of coho salmon, which reads in part, unlike most coastal rivers, the Cowichan does not suffer from extreme rapid discharge, nor does it experience low flows. Mr. Chair, one would presume this QEP report has gone through CVRD staff and Forest Lands Natural Resource Operations, who are tasked with reviewing and approving the reports. QEP can and do make mistakes, as do those reviewing the reports. Will the EASC send this back to staff for follow-up so the directors can make their recommendation on accurate information? And with respect to UB1, it is nice to see that staff have recommended this DP application be referred to the APC for consideration. I hope EASC directors will endorse the referral recommendation. And that concludes public input.
Thank you, Ms. Legault. To correspondence, C1. Grant aid request electoral area D. And the recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that a grant aid electoral area D, Cowichan Bay, in the amount of $7,000 be provided to Cowichan Bay Improvement Association to support an outdoor portal in the village as per the Cowichan Bay charrette. Moved by Director Yanni DiNardo, seconded by Director Kuhn. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? None opposed, the motion carries. Item C2, grant aid electoral area F, and the recommendation is that it be recommended to the board that a grant aid electoral area F, Cowichan Lake South Scotts Falls, in the amount of $9,450 be provided to Cowichan Lake and District Chamber of Commerce to support area visitor center services in the amount of $7,500 and to contribute to area tourism promotional maps, $1,950. And is there a mover for that recommendation? Moved by Director Kuhn, seconded by Director Acton. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Is there any opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. Item C3, grant aid electoral area I, and essentially it's the exact same resolution or virtually the same resolution for electoral area I, and it be recommended the board. Grant aid electoral area I, Yubo Mead Creek, same amount, $9,450 to the same destination, Cowichan Lake and District Chamber of Commerce, in support of visitor center services and the area tourism promotional maps. Do I have a mover? Moved by Director Kuhn, seconded by Director Acton. Any discussion on this item? I see no hands. I will call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. As stated earlier in my opening, these will be delayed a little bit, but they will be going to the board on September the 9th in the evening. The next item is item 5, and it's for information, and it's a letter from Pamela Miller. And I would look to the directors. We've had an opportunity to read it. I see Director Acton with her hand up. Director Acton, I recognize you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if anyone else wants to speak, but I do have a motion because of this letter. I do share a lot of the same concerns as the Kingburn Community Association, and I appreciate all their work in the community and keeping their group informed. It's a large group who are very keep informed, and it is something that I think we should be thinking about. So I do have a motion for whenever the committee is willing to entertain it.
Well, I've got everybody on the screen, so I'm just looking for an indication. Is there any need for discussion on this item? So maybe Director Yanni DiNardo or Director Nicholson. Director Nicholson, would you like to go ahead, please? Director Acton, mute your mic.
Thank you. I thought this letter was very interesting. I know the Kingburn Association members were present on our community Zoom call that we had several weeks ago to discuss the state of the Coxsila watershed. And I was on a call yesterday with provincial staff who indicated that we're probably about 2 weeks away again to critical environmental flow levels in the Coxsila. And that is, even though we've had a very moist spring, the river is very sensitive to dry drought conditions. So this is an issue that is not going to go away. And I think that we have to pay attention to it in terms of land use in particular. Everyone is trying to do their bit in the Coxsila watershed to conserve water. In particular, the farmers are really taking a big hit on this. So I think it's an interesting idea that we need to start thinking about investigating. So I'm curious as to what Director Acton's motion is.
Seeing no other hands, I'll go to Director Acton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Director Nicholson. My motion is that staff provide a report on options and approaches related to the management of development in the Coxsila watershed pending the results of a watershed study.
Are you moving that?
So moved.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by, we got a couple seconders. So seconded by Director Salmon, and speakers speaking to the motion, I have Director Nicholson followed by Kuhn. Director Nicholson, please proceed.
I think this is really important work to do. What I would like to see, though, is, and I've asked the chair to do an invitation to the provincial water staff so that we have a presentation of the board about the Coxsila watershed and what is happening. And I think that it would be beneficial for staff to spend some time with provincial staff, or at least understand what is going on with the watershed and the work that's being undertaken and the questions that they have, so that that can be taken into consideration with this report. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Kuhn.
The motion indicated that it was subject to a study on the Coxsila. I thought a study on the Coxsila had been done. When was it? A year ago or so? Do we need another one?
Director Kuhn, I think I'll take this one. There's a basin plan that's being undertaken right now with external parties. I think that's what's being referred to. I believe Cowichan tribes and the provincial government are engaged in a fairly important and exhaustive study of the area, and I think that's what Director Acton is referring to. Does that help?
Yeah.
Director Smith, and I believe to close.
So my wondering is, where does this fit under the drinking water and watershed protection, and where that is a focus for the staff currently, and where would the staff capacity come from for this?
Well, I think that's going to be Mr. Carruthers' question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So if I understand the intent of the resolution, that would be a planning exercise, not a drinking water and watershed protection exercise. That would be legislative ability for the board to consider limiting or restricting development.
And that seems to be, from the nodding from Director Acton, the intent in that. Director Smith, a follow-up.
So will that involve staff capacity also? Can you please answer that, Mr. Carruthers?
Mr. Carruthers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to have to refer to Ms. Cherolf to address her staff's capacity to take that on in a potential timeline.
Ms. Cherolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, it will impact staff resources. If, however, it's a priority for the board, we are happy to undertake that work and are happy to coordinate with provincial staff in the preparation of alternatives for your consideration.
Thank you. Director Nicholson, final follow-up, Director Smith.
So can part of this fall underneath our MOCP in that area? Is it that part of the planning under our OCP or under the Coxsala area's local plan? You know, we did indicate during strategic planning that our focus was to get our MOCP finalized and out there to get the benefits for the whole, all the electoral areas. And if we're diverting staff capacity into one particular area, then we're not all moving as quickly as possible towards the benefits for the whole areas. I understand the concern for the Coxsala, and this is a very important part, but I think it's really staff capacity and our direction through strategic planning is the MOCP. I'm not really sure that we should be headed this direction at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Smith. I saw Director Nicholson put her hand up again. Would you like to add something to this discussion, Director Nicholson?
Well, I'm thinking that a staff report really will need some input from the environmental services group because of their expertise in watershed management, as well as, but I agree, it is primarily about land use planning. And what Director Acton has requested is a staff report, which presumably can provide us with options and the implications. This isn't about doing work at this time. It's just asking for a staff report on this issue, which I have to say is extremely critical at this point.
Ms. Chirelf, I'll leave the final comment to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say that further to Director Smith's comments, modifications to the official community plan or to zoning regulations may be one of the options, and there may be others that we can put forward. I didn't note a timeline previously. I would anticipate that you should be able to get a report from the Community Planning Division sometime prior to the end of October at the latest.
Thank you, Ms. Chirelf. Seeing no other hands, I will call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? I see one opposed. The motion carries. Next item will be, we're going to use a little chair privilege here. We have an unfinished business item. We have dealt with the information item. We have Brody Davis with us, who I'm sad to say we had waiting for an awful long time at the last meeting, and due to technical issues was unable to participate when his item came forward for consideration by this committee. So this is being brought back as an item for discussion and for the applicant to have an opportunity to speak to it. So just for process-wise, Mr. Davis, we will have the staff present a very brief synopsis. Any questions from directors will go to staff. When that's completed, I will ask if you have anything that you'd like to add or the likes, and then questions from the directors through to you if there are any. So with that, I would turn to, I actually have a list of who's taking what today. And I believe it may be Mr. Tippett introducing this item, or is it another planner for this item? Sorry. Ms. Chirelf, who's taking this one?
Mr. Chair, it should be Planner Emily Dixon.
Oh, Ms. Dixon. There she is. She's activated her camera as directed. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will go ahead and share my screen.
Thank you.
Can everyone see this okay?
Yes.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. This is UB1, application DP 20E05, unfinished business from the meeting of July 15th. The subject property is zoned I1 and within the industrial park south of town off Roberts Road. A landscape plan was submitted as per the Coxsila Development Permit Area guidelines. As you can see on the drawing here, there are raised garden beds as well as fencing along the southern portion of the property. The proposed building is a fabric tent structure, indicated here as the proposed tent building. This building is proposed for mostly to house material that are already on the site. The recommendation before you is that the permit be issued as the development permit application was consistent with the development permit guidelines.
Your microphone. We didn't hear you.
I got to repeat that. No, simply we'll ask if directors have any questions for Ms. Dixon on this application. We have had a look at it at a previous meeting. Directors, any questions for the planner from Ms. Dixon? Director Nicholson, you're up.
Ms. Dixon, I have a hard time squaring that this request to put a tent-like structure meets the form and character development permit guidelines. Can you explain to me how that it would be so?
Ms. Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Director Nicholson. The development permit area was established to protect mainly environmental conditions of the site. This was considered throughout the review of the application, and it was identified that the watercourse nearby was not riparian in nature. And so that kind of took care of that part of the development permit guidelines. The form and character for the industrial building, the guidelines were specific that the intention of any new development should be directed towards the consideration of improving upon the aesthetics of the surrounding area, which it was staff's opinion that this would be a better alternative to add this building rather than to have it exist as it does today, as it does shelter a lot of the material that is there and will add to the aesthetics in the sense that it will less cluttered from the street. The applicant was also willing to recommend some landscaping, which provided this application is approved, we will for. And the landscaping is meant to sort of counteract any dislike of a tent structure.
Follow up, Director Nicholson.
Yeah, so I guess on the issue of the environmental protection, would there not be a is there an oil separator required in that parking lot? It's an automotive business, I believe.
Ms. Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Nicholson. Sorry, Dr. Nicholson. The development permit guidelines. Sorry, Director. The development permit guidelines do not speak to the oil separators, I believe, in this specific development permit area. I'm just pulling it up now. It definitely does limit the percentage of impervious surface and parking area, and does mention the oil water separators where feasible. It is my understanding, though, that this application as proposed is still well under the impervious surface coverage required through the zoning.
Thank you, Ms. Dixon. Any other questions for staff at this point? I see none. I'm going to ask Ms. Dixon to stay with us because now I will go to Mr. Brody Davis and ask if you have anything that you'd like to add or any salient points that we should be considering with this application.
So, a couple things. Touching on the oil separator, the business is both properties, this 2827 Roberts Road as well as 2839 Roberts Road. I own Bimmer Parts. We're a BMW auto wrecker. All of our dismantling and draining of fluids, AC, oil, fuels, it happens at 2839 Roberts Road where we do have an oil separator on a concrete pad. The cars are basically clean. We're a certified area auto wrecker. All the cars in the yard are drained of all fluids. So no dismantling actually happens on that property. In my opinion, adding the tent structure with the fence, the landscaping will definitely improve the aesthetics from the street view because you won't see the cars in the yard that are there for storage. There are other tents in this area, so that's my concern is why this one would be an issue versus other ones that are in the industrial area already. I'm just not quite understanding how it's any different versus the other ones on the street. I also had the RAR report done for you guys, which shows, yeah, like Emily said, the ditch is non-fish bearing and of no concern, and the landscape design as well as requested. So,
thank you very much. Is there any of the committee members have any questions for Mr. Davis? Director Nicholson.
So, Mr. Davis, I really appreciate you applying, and I drove around the business park and noticed that there are tents springing up everywhere, and we've only, to my knowledge, had a request for a permit to do so, which was from Top Shelf across the road from you. So I am kind of concerned about this because when the Top Shelf application came before the APC, there was a lot of concern about what tents would look like 10 or 15 years from now and the deterioration of the form and character of the business park. And I think that there's a real sense that that area is changing, and its proximity to Duncan is meaning that it's becoming less of an industrial park, maybe more of a light industrial park, business park type of a place. And there is some desire by some of the people who have businesses there to improve the place a little bit in terms of looks. So I feel like the tent issue is really a step backwards, but I really sympathize with you and do appreciate you coming and applying. So that's why I was very interested in referring it back to the APC to have a discussion about where we need to go with form and character in the area, because hopefully that will be included in the modernization, because we were kind of cut short on the Area E OCP modernization.
Mr. Davis, any comment?
Anything no, I do appreciate that. I mean, I can understand where you guys want to keep this like near the city and looking nice. However, I do think this will actually improve the look of this property significantly. And yeah, like I said, there's tents going up all over the place, and I obviously am the only other person who has applied for them, which is concerning for me also, because why is no one else following the rules? And what are the repercussions for them? Because I've been working at this for almost 8 months now, and I mean, if I just slapped the tent up, what was the difference, to be honest, at this point? Like, I'm trying to follow the rules. I'm a young business owner, and I want everything to happen properly, but I'm just kind of like, why is no one else following the rules at this point, right?
So thank you for that. I've got do you have a follow-up for Mr. Davis, Director Nicholson?
Yeah, I'd be interested. Have you thought about investing in a actual building?
Yeah.
Mr. Davis, sure, go ahead.
The problem is I've already purchased this tent building. I'm into this thing for nearly $50,000, and it's been sitting idle for almost a year. So I'm just trying to recover some of my ROI on this. Like, I need to get something back out of this tent because I have all the engineering done. I have the RAR report done. Like, I'm into this thing for $50,000, and if it doesn't go through, then I'm just out a ton of money. And I mean, honestly, as a 25-year-old, that is very, very hard to swallow.
So I've got Director Yanni DiNardo, myself, and Director Wilson. So Director Yanni DiNardo, question for the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm actually concerned that we're directing this applicant and some of the questions are really not any of our business. If the development permit has everything has been okayed through our staff, I'm just concerned the direction that these questions are going. So I'd really like the chair to be more concerned of that as well. Thank you.
Well, it sounds like you're almost reading my mind because my next question was actually going to be for staff, but I will yield and let Director Wilson speak next, and then I'll direct my question to staff. So Director Wilson, what have you got?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Yeah, exactly what Director Yanni DiNardo said. We have no... I don't understand how a question could come, can you put up a building in there in these troubled times? You know, give the guy a break, for goodness sake. He's following the rules. Let's just get on and get on with it.
Thank you for that, Director Wilson. So I don't believe that was a question for the applicant, but I will go to staff now with a question where, you know, I just contemplating this and, you know, my predecessor used to drill into me this idea of the either or clause. You know, either we proceed with this or what's the alternative? And it sounds like a heck of a lot of money that will be wasted on the applicant's behalf. He's actually come in the door, spoken to staff, done what's been asked of him. And so my question is, if this is going to be referred to the APC on a form and character question, and the director for the area has already indicated that the changes that she would like to see would be future-oriented changes. So is there something in the form and character or some merit in a referral to the APC that would, you know, in a sense, bring about a change to the staff recommendation based on the current laws in place? And I saw Ms. Terrell raise her hand on that note.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to point you to the Local Government Act and your current legislative authority with respect to this particular development permit area, which is designated for two purposes, one under natural environment and the other under for form and character under 488(1)(f) of the Local Government Act. And what that section of what the Local Government Act basically says is that if there's a development permit area designated under this section for form and character, that development permit may only include requirements respecting the character of the development, but only in relation to the general character and not to particulars of landscaping or of exterior design and finish of buildings and other structures. And I think you recently had the same sort of messaging from Mr. Don Lidstone regarding form and character.
Thank you. That's very instructive. And so having heard what our staff have recommended, and I think I may have to go to Ms. Legault on this because we have previously passed a recommendation that this be referred. And I think there may be a couple of directors, including myself, that are questioning the merit of a referral. We've got the applicant before us. He's answered our question. So Ms. Legault, given that we've already passed a recommendation, I would turn to the committee as to ask them what to do next. But what are the options as to what we could do next? Could we rescind the motion that we've already made and consider another? I would like to test the House on what their ideas are. So I see Director Wilson's hand up, but I want to hear from Ms. Legault first as to our options.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If the committee would like to take a new direction, that's certainly an option to rescind the previous recommendation and pass a new recommendation.
And there is a recommendation available in the staff report that would allow for this to proceed, correct? So I saw hands go up all over the room. So I'll go to, I haven't heard from Director Wilson put his hand up first. So Director Wilson first, then Haim, then I believe Yanni DiNardo and Kuhn. So Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to come down hard on the side of the applicant here. This is just not right. He's done everything he's supposed to do. We've made recommendations before in the past. Yeah. I honestly don't understand why we're even discussing that in the length that we are. I think we should just go ahead and issue the DP as the staff has recommended.
So before I go to the next speaker, and I have Director Haim, Kuhn, Yanni, Donardo, and Salmon, direction from our corporate officer has been that we could rescind the previous resolution and then proceed anew. So I see Director Yanni Donardo, I think you're wanting to do that. So a motion to rescind the resolution from the previous meeting. And I see a seconder from Director Kuhn. Now, we did have a speakers list. Is there anybody that wants to be heard before we go to a vote on a rescinding of the motion? Director Salmon, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I've got this straight. So, just regarding the other tents in the area,
hang on, this
complaints.
Director Salmon, we have a motion on the floor on rescinding the motion. So any discussion around that, like your comment's perfectly appropriate, but when we have another resolution on the floor, we're simply talking about rescinding this motion right now.
Okay.
So is there any other discussion around the rescinding of the motion that was passed at our last meeting? And do we need it read out, Ms. Legault, or is everybody clear on, by nodding, is everybody clear on what we're doing?
I'd like it read out, please.
Okay, so I believe the resolution from our last meeting was that the development permit number DP20E05 for PID 001194429 be referred to the Electoral Area E Couch and Station Satellum Glenora Advisory Planning Commission for input and comment on the design and landscape features. That's the motion before us. The motion is to rescind that previous motion. Seeing no other hands up, I will call the question to rescind. And all those in favor? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All those opposed? 1, 2. Well, motion passes to rescind. So with that, I would have to go to the previous meeting. And Ms. Legault, do you happen to have handy what the staff recommendation was from the previous report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The recommended option was that development permit number DP20E05 for PID 001194429 be issued.
We have moved by alternate Director Haim, seconded by Director Wilson. So we have a duly moved and seconded resolution on the floor. We also have a speakers list. We haven't heard from directors Haim, Kuhn, Yanni Donardo, and Salmon on this resolution or the item in general. So I was going to proceed with the speakers list. Everybody comfortable with that? Excellent. Alternate Director Haim.
Actually, previously I was on the list just to make the motion to rescind, so I'm fine at this point.
Thank you, alternate Director Haim. Director Kuhn, do you have anything you'd like to add on this specific resolution?
I'm very much in favor of going forward with this. I'm a bit dismayed about the whole way that this has been handled. It is one more example as to how we throw one hurdle after another in front of people that are trying to get employment going, that are trying to do a business. They put their money on the line, and we sit here and say, well, no, we need this, we need this, we need this. I am so sick and tired of treating applicants that actually provide employment, that actually pay taxes, of which we live off. So I'm very much in favor of going ahead with this.
Thank you, Director Kuhn. Director Yanni Donardo.
Thank you. I was just doing I was interested in the rescinding motion as well.
Thank you. Director Salmon to close.
Yeah, thank you. So my question was just about other tents, and I was going to ask staff if we've had complaints on any of them so far.
That's kind of stretching it, but I think for the purposes of rounding out debate, we should ask if there are any staff that can provide us any information on complaints on those. I don't see any. Oh, look at Mr. Morano right there, who's just popped into the screen. Mr. Morano, do you have any brief comment on complaints about other unauthorized structures in that area?
I'm not aware of any unauthorized structures in that area. That's not to say that there isn't, but we're not working on anything currently.
Thank you, Mr. Morano. Do you have anything further? Thank you. So I will call the question on the motion, which has been read, and we'll go to the next board meeting on the 9th of September. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? I see an unopposed motion being carried. Thank you, Mr. Davis, for attending today. And as I said, the next step will be on at the board meeting. And good luck in your endeavors. And thank you for your efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you, staff, as well. That took a couple of meetings, but I think we got to where we needed to be on that one. So job well done. So we will now go back to the report section, section 6 of our agenda. How's everybody doing? Everybody's doing well so far. Good. R1. And I do believe we have Ms. Angela Nessel, who was in the waiting room and will be joining us. Thank you. So just for a process outline, the staff will present the report. We will have questions from the directors to staff. And when that is completed, we will then turn to you, ask if you have anything further to add to what's already been presented in the report. And hopefully, if when that's done, if there's any questions that my colleagues, the directors, have for you, that you would be available to answer those questions. And then once I go to the board or the committee for a resolution, your role will be done at that point. So with that, I would ask the planner of record, Ms. Boyle, to present R1. Welcome, Ms. Boyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm just going to start sharing my screen.
And are you able to get your microphone a little closer? You were sounding a little muffled.
Oh, is this better?
A little bit, yes.
A little bit? Okay, yep. Perfect. So I'm just going to share my screen. So I'm presenting a development variance permit DVP 20E04 for Lot 1 on Jeffreys Road. So this lot is located at the end of Jeffreys Road. It's currently vacant. There are 2 water courses on the property. There's one water course in the front of the property on the northern portion of the parcel that is a wetland with a stream running through it, and another water course identified, which was a man-made ditch by the previous owners. The applicant is proposing to build 6 buildings. So the first is a very small, under 10 square meter power shed, but it will be located in the front of the property within the wetland area. It has already received a Section 11 approval under the Water Sustainability Act and was determined to be the location that would provide the least negative environmental impact on the property, and it's located right next to an existing driveway. And so this is necessary for bringing power to the property. And then the applicant is proposing siting a dwelling and an accessory building, and then subsequently will construct a garage and another dwelling, which will then become the primary dwelling, as well as another accessory building. So with the exception of the power shed, I should note that a wrapper assessment report has been completed, and the development permit, authority to issue development permit is delegated to the general manager. So this application for the development permit is also being worked on, but has not been issued at this time. So the wrapper assessment report did designate a SPIA around the wetland with in the northern portion of the parcel with the stream running through it, and also identified or designated the SPIA on the southern portion of the around the man-made drainage ditch with the exception of the power shed, which, as I mentioned, already obtained approval from the province, all of the buildings will be outside of the designated SPIA areas. So, and were identified in locations that were not going to harm, that would be the most beneficial for mitigating any negative environmental impact. I should also note, I forgot to mention that in between the two watercourse areas, there's an elevated grass bench area. And this area is very stable, it's flat, it's clear, and it's been identified as the most suitable for development. So the variances that are requested are, the first one is to reduce the front setback, from 7.5 meters to 0.5 meters to allow the placement of the power shed to allow for power to the property. And then the second variance is to reduce the setback from the designated SPIA boundary to 0 meters for the construction of the remainder of the building. So in electoral area E, there's, in addition to the watercourse setback, which in this case is the SPIA designated setback, in addition to this, there's an additional setback from any building or structure to any designated SPIA, which is set at 7.5 meters or 12.5% of the parcel depth, which is measured from the SPIA boundary to the front of the parcel line. And this case, just because of the way the water courses lie on the property and the designated SPIAs, this makes the whole property fall within a setback area. Whereas from the site assessment and the wrapper assessment report, it's been identified that actually there is a buildable area on that elevated bench area. So the variance would allow the applicants to construct the buildings outside of the SPIAs, but within that elevated bench area that was identified as suitable for the building. And the third variance request is to increase the maximum permitted size of the one of the residential accessory buildings from 100 square meters to 107 square meters, which is a relatively minor variance request, relatively minor increase in size. So the recommendation is that it be recommended to the board that development variance permit number DVP 20E04 be issued. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Yanni Donardo. Just a very good report. I want to just provide a little context around our discussions prior to getting underway. Ms. Boyle's done a very good job of explaining the nature of the request before us. I would just caution everyone that we've been engaging in qualified environmental professional reports for years. We have done a lot of lobbying with the provincial government to ensure the quality and integrity of those reports, as they are a very important tool in us conducting the business for the community. So I would just caution that you may have a concern about a specific item within a report. Fair enough, but I would again caution on remarks around the general nature, integrity of the information that's before us. These reports are submitted to the province, and if they go through that review period with the province, we are obliged to accept them as they are written. So I give you that proviso in advance of getting underway. So with that, I would turn to the directors and ask if you have any questions of staff on this particular file. Director Nicholson.
Yes, I do have question. I do have question for Ms. Cheryl on the quality of the RAR report and what we can do if we do not feel it is of very good quality.
That was a question through to Ms. Cheryl.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So typically, if this were only a development permit application, if there was no variance that was being requested, this would come forward through staff to the general manager for consideration. If through the process of the review concerns were raised with the quality of the reports, we would follow up with the applicant, with the professional, and with the province if necessary.
Thank you, Ms. Sherrill.
So,
follow up, Director Nicholson.
So this is a variance and it's come to us, and so I guess has the province reviewed this report?
Ms. Boyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The province has reviewed this report and is actively working with the qualified environmental professional on this report. And the development permit review is underway.
Thank you, Ms. Boyle. Final follow-up, Director Nicholson.
So I guess if we have concerns and there are issues that we'd like clarification, how do we proceed with that? Are you able to work with the province on that if they're working with the applicant, or how does that work?
You know, I'm looking at Mr. Carruthers, who has been intimately involved in these discussions back and forth in regards to these issues. Do you want to take a stab at that, Mr. Carruthers? I know I've been at many of those meetings as well, and essentially what I've been told is if it's been through their process, we take what they give us. So, Mr. Carruthers, Ms. Sherrill, anything to add?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would tend to agree with you. I mean, if there are glaring errors or glaring omissions, we will often seek to have a peer review. I'm not intimately familiar with this particular report, so I would refer to Ms. Cheroff, but essentially the professional reliance model is just that. You know, if there's something egregious or something very obvious, we will do that, but otherwise we accept the reports as they come in. Ms. Cheroff?
Anything to add, Ms. Sherrill?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just further to the comments, as Ms. Boyle has noted, the applicants have made a concerted effort to propose development in locations on the property which would have the lowest degree of impact in terms of the environment, and that's consistent with the direction that's been provided by the professional. Further to that, as Ms. Boyle noted, we continue to work with the applicant and the professional on the development permit side of things.
Thank you, Ms. Sherrill. Somebody's got some kind of noise going on in the background, and it's definitely not me. I will go to Director Salmon next, but I'd just like to reiterate and remind everyone that the purpose of this application before us is about a variance for a power shed and not the overall development permit and the nature of the development, the regular development permit and those items. This is about a variance for a hydropower shed on the property. Director Salmon.
Thank you. We had a general question, but just to clarify, Mr. Chair, that is it not also for a variance on the zero setback for some of the other buildings?
Ms. Boyle.
Yes, so there are 3 variances as part of this application. So the first is to reduce the front setback from 7.5 meters to 0.5 meters for a residential accessory building. And then I guess the second would be to increase a residential accessory building from 100 square meters to 107 square meters. And the third, I will just share my screen just a second. And the third is in relation to the setback for a water course. So in Electoral Area E, Section 5.18 B reads, the SPIA setback is as follows. Where a streamside protection enhancement area has been designated on a parcel, no building, structure, lane, or highway, nor driveway shall be located closer than 7.5 meters or 12.5% of the average parcel depth, whichever is greater, to the SPIA, with the parcel depth being measured between the SPIA boundary and the front parcel line. So the The third variance is a request to reduce that specific SPIA setback to 0 meters, seeing as the, oops, I will stop sharing. Seeing as all the buildings are outside of the designated SPIAs and identified by the qualified environmental professional as in the most suitable area on the property, and that SPIA setback is under the entire area within the setback. The variance request is to reduce that to 0 so that it would be the SPIA setback itself.
I stand corrected. Director Salmon, follow up.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification. So it's a significant, it's a 0 setback from a SPIA. So the variance, one of the variances we're looking at. But my question was actually just for Ms. Charolf more generally. So I take it the development permit part of it, aside from, not clear the variance is a separate thing, but just the DP, this was delegated to staff because it's in the Cowichan River development permit area is my understanding. So is there just a logic to that, how some DPs do come to the committee and some are delegated, or is it a historical sort of accident?
Ms. Charolf, the policy, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure if I can tell you why certain permits were delegated and others were not. The board has the ability to delegate all development permits, and I think previously majority of development permits were delegated with the exception of some in relation to subdivision and others in relation to form and character of development. So predominantly the majority of environmental DPs do come to the general manager.
Interesting. Okay. Just it seems odd to me that one in a Cowichan River DPA is. You would think it would be the opposite. Those would come and others might not. But anyway, that's the way it is.
Just before Ms. Charolf jumps in, it's always been, I believe, the practice of the organization that those that are delegated to the general manager, but the general manager has the discretion to say, hey, folks, I think this one should come before committee, and that's quite often the decision that is made. Ms. Charolf, do you have something to add?
Yeah, so just further to that, I think that also the practice has been for technical development permits to be delegated to the general manager, where the applicant can demonstrate compliance with the guidelines. They're obligated to have the permit issued to them, whereas you have potentially other development permit areas with wider degree of discretion where there may be opportunities for some conflicting interpretation of guidelines. Ideally, we have very clear guidelines. And in this case, we'll work through that process with the applicants around existing guidelines with respect to the DP.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other hands, I welcome the applicants to the meeting, and now would be the time. If you have something that you would like to add in addition to what the staff have already presented to us, now would be your time. So unmute your mic, and what have you got to share?
Okay, firstly, I'd like to thank Chloe Boyle. Great presentation. I think she did a really good job of covering all of the points. It's a rather complicated property. I did want to add in relation to the setback that's imposed by the CVRD on top of the SPIA, our qualified environmental professional was feeling that it was a little bit redundant. We already have a SPIA setback to help protect the watercourse, and it was advised by him in his report that that be lifted because we're already outside of that setback that is made to protect that, and it's in a very separate area, like Chloe had mentioned, up on a bench that's already been logged and filled by the previous owner, so it's quite a distance away from the watercourses. So with those imposed setbacks of the CVRD bylaw, that 12.5% of the parcel depth has actually brought the two SPIAs together, and it would leave not one space on our property that we could build a home, making it essentially useless as a residential property. So that's sort of the main reason why we need to seek a variance, to be able to reduce that CVRD setback to 0 and just use the SPIA as setbacks. But I think Chloe covered it really well.
Great. Thank you very much. Is there any of the directors have any questions for the applicants? Director Nicholson.
Thanks. It certainly is a challenging site. I am wondering, the drawing is a little bit complicated to understand. Are your buildings going to be fairly well clustered together? And how does the driveway through the wetland work?
So if I may answer, the driveway through the wetland was existing. There's a culvert where the Dot Creek flows under the driveway. That was already in place, so it's good there. So it goes up and over the creek. And that's why we had to bring the power down to the end of the road and build that shed near the road. So then we could go underground and over top of the culvert, because we are unable to put telephone poles and that sort of thing through the wetland because of all the guy wires to hold it. So after extensive conversation, that was the least impact to get power in and an increased cost, but we were willing to do that to protect that wetland. And then, sorry, what was the second part of your question? That was the driveway.
Clustered homes, or
yes.
buildings, certainly, yes.
Okay, maybe I can share that drawing up here again for you. I know how to do this. Where's the screen share?
Hang on just a sec, Ms. Nessel. Ms. Boyle, do you have the drawing that she's referring to? I'd prefer to have staff share the material.
You could have the site plan that shows the shed at the front. We could probably work with this one in interest of time. Okay, so Chloe, if you could make it bigger because we can't really see the road. So you'll see at the top of the parcel, there's the green line that marks the edge of the wetland. Right at the little dotted line to the left side of the parcel, there you go, that is the driveway. That's the existing driveway that goes straight up to the bench. And the small power shed would be located 0.5 meters from the front property line on the right-hand side of the driveway there. And then if we scroll down, the building sites over on the left border, you'll see the rectangle there, thank you. That is my father's planned house, so that's our small suite under 90 square meters. And then the two circular buildings there are the main home and then the proposed garage below. So in that center area of, this is sort of a large field between the cabin and the circular buildings. It's a sort of pastoral area, but there's a large stand of trees right in the middle, which is why we've sort of put the houses that way to preserve those trees. Does that help?
Excellent. Any further questions for the applicant? Director Salmon?
I just wonder, does the wetland change size much as you move through the seasons? And I'll follow up when you're done.
It does shrink definitely this time of year. It has narrowed. When the measurements were taken, it was in February, so it was at the greatest amount of water at that point.
Follow up?
Okay, and what's the historical use of that field?
The previous owner was just using it as his own personal park. He just had it cleared and manicured.
Okay, thank you.
Turn to the director for the area.
I'll move the...
Move the recommendation. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Director Kuhn. And for everyone's information, I will go to you when I've read the recommendation that it be recommended to the board that the development variance permit number DVP 20E04 for PID 001750798 be issued. And on that motion, Director Nicholson.
Thank you. Maybe maybe I should hold my comments until after we've completed with this application, if I may.
You'd like me to come back to you after we voted on the resolution? Fair enough. Any other debate and discussion on the resolution before you? I see no hands. I will call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? I see none opposed. That motion carries. And for the applicant's benefit, that resolution will go to our next board meeting on the, is it the 7th of September?
The 9th.
The 9th of September. Good backup. Thank you. And thank you for attending today. Turn to Director Nicholson. You may want to stay for a moment to hear Director Nicholson. Go ahead. You're muted still, Director Nicholson.
Sorry. Thank you. I am reflecting on the application we had on Barnjum Road, where we did a subdivision, I think it was last time or the time before, in a wetland complex. And it resulted in following the rules in Area E, which are very much out of date. It resulted in an 8-lot subdivision. And one of the lots in particular had very limited area to build once you took the wetland areas out. And this is exactly what we're setting. That decision is exactly what is set up here. So we have here people who have a piece of property and they're it's very limited on what they can do on the property if they follow the rules. And I really think that we need to update Area E's regulations so that people aren't put in this position. Protecting the wetlands is incredibly important. Protecting the riparian areas, particularly in the important Cowichan River area, is, you know, absolutely critical. And I will add that that QEP report is appalling, absolutely appalling. There's no mention of amphibians. The monitoring is no mention of timing of when development should occur. So I'm hoping that staff will take that into consideration when they do the development permit, that it would not be wise to be doing development in the winter if we have a huge rainstorm. There will be all sorts of potential damage to the creek area. So, yeah.
Thank you, Director Nicholson. And I would just remind the directors that, as I said in the outset, that we have policies and procedures that we follow. And I didn't interrupt Director Nicholson in the throes of her comments. But I would remind everyone that it is not within our scope of responsibilities to comment on the integrity or the quality of reports that are provided to us that applicants pay for and that the provincial government authorizes. So I would ask you to please keep that in mind in regards to your remarks on this or future files. Having said that, thank you very much for joining us, and we will get. Is everybody ready to proceed to the next one, or does anybody need a short break? Okay, let's keep going. R2. And this is Inspection and Enforcement Division, and I believe we have either Mr. Morano or Mr. Brisky to join us today for this report. It's for information. I would go to the committee and ask if there are any questions in regards to these reports for staff. I see no hands. Thank you, Mr. Morano, for joining us. I will go to R3. And this is for Inspection and Enforcement Division. That must be Mr. Morano again. It is. This is for information as well. I see Director Acton raise her hand. Go ahead, Director Acton.
Hi there. Thank you. I don't want to insult staff, so I'm not. So, but I was under the understanding that we were going to get a I guess my wording is more like, I don't want anyone to take this personally, but I was expecting more of a report of how the soil bylaw is doing, not how much money it's making. It's great that it's paying for itself, but I think we were told that after a year we would be reviewing the bylaw. We obviously need to improve it, and I thought that that report was coming to this meeting. So myself and the community were still very anxious. I was, even before being elected, came to this same board and said, okay, we got to do something. We need to be smart here. And it's not, we can't just sit back and say, okay, we did what we were supposed to do. We did this bylaw. It's not good enough. So I was expecting that kind of report to come forward and say, this is what we could do to improve it. This is what we could go to do to go to the province, and look at where it's falling short, because it definitely, in our community in the South, it's falling short. So I don't think we need high fives yet.
Mr. Carruthers, I saw you lean in there. Do you want to take a stab at this?
Well, no, other than, Mr. Chair, just to say that I'll remind the committee that the board had directed a legal opinion on the soil bylaw, and so I would suggest that the board and the committee may want to await the results of that to discuss any deficiencies or issues that they see with regard to the soil bylaw.
Now, I think I saw Ms. Jarrell raise her hand as well, so why don't you chime in here, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for the clarification of the board, the intent of the bylaw enforcement report was simply to provide a quarterly update on the bylaw enforcement service as a whole, not specifically on the soil bylaw or regulation of soil deposit. That's going to be a much bigger issue for discussion coming forward, and I anticipate you will be hearing more.
Thank you, Ms. Jarrell. Director Salmon.
Thank you, and I agree, need for more detail, but I was wondering, could we get a breakdown of roughly those 230,000 cubic meters, how many for each of the 8 Type C permits that we have?
I don't know if that's possible. I'm just pulling up the report again, where the screens keeps jumping around. Mr. Morano, do you have access to that information at hand right now?
No, I don't, Mr. Chair. This report was just intended to be a general report and not get that specific.
So maybe we could have that next time this comes up.
Will you please make a note of that request? And as stated earlier, we will be having additional discussion and information about this at a future date. And that's a more than relevant question worth asking. Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just noticed that there was only one fireworks report, but I have noticed in the last few years that the fireworks sales have become bigger and bigger. There's more places that are selling them that are just not in the Cowichan Valley. Is there any way that we would be working with any of those other areas that are selling? I believe Ladysmith and the Malahat. Is there any way that we can collaborate with them like we did with Cowichan Tribes in getting this back on track again, like we did a few years ago with the fireworks?
I don't. I'm reluctant to pose that to staff. I think that we all know exactly what the scenario you're describing is, and I think that it may be more than appropriate for staff to just take that as informal direction to investigate and perhaps report back to us at opportunities to achieve what you've mentioned. Is that fair enough at this point, Director?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to, don't really get a chance to sort of mention that in general, but we were doing so well, and then the last 3 years, it seems like we're sort of back a little bit more to square one, but I just wanted to make a note of that. Thank you. And also I noticed that the waste management, there was a lot of for area C. So waste management, does that mean garbage? Like just garbage that's been left there? I'm not exactly sure what waste management means.
Mr. Morano?
That category covers a broad range of things, but the bulk of it was burning. Because these bylaws come from engineering department, we cataloged it in one section, and but the bulk, I can tell you that the bulk of it is the burning calls. Through the COVID, we had some burn bans, and we were aiding the provincial government, and we were being quite proactive, and as well as we were working on weekends, and we had a spike of burn calls that we responded to, and mainly in response to the provincial burn bans and in association with COVID.
Thank you so much. It was the first. I'm hoping that will continue in September. This is the first spring that in Cherry Point I was able to walk without something over my mouth in the evenings with my dog. So I think that it was really noticeable with the burn ban in partnership with the province. And also, I wonder if, and is Area C as well, they're not in the garbage pickup. Is that correct?
I think that would be an engineering staff question, unless Mr. Morano, do you want to take it on?
From what I understand, South End is a private pickup, but engineering can certainly clarify that.
Mr. Dennison, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, that's correct. We have recycling collection only in A, B, and C.
Because just to follow up, Mr. Chair, I just noticed that I know Valley View, which is in Area C, it's closer to Cowichan Bay. I have had reports that they have quite a few garbage bins just in their little development, and they keep their land very meticulous, and they do a great work with landscape at Valley View. And they are saying the amount of people's garbage, household garbage that they get in all their garbage cans is atrocious. So, I just wonder if we could really have a look at this again and have a more efficient way of garbage pickup for everyone, because it seems to me that a lot of it goes, well, either burnt or dumped in other places. But just making a comment. Thank you.
Yeah, Director Yanni DiNardo, that was pretty sly, going from bylaw enforcement to curbside and garbage collection. But Director Wilson, if you could respond
garbage,
to the.
So it's connected.
Yeah, fair enough. But Director Wilson, go ahead, and I think you heard what I just said to Director Yanni DiNardo.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, it was pretty sly there, Director Yanni DiNardo. We have a private system down here which works very well, and we have a system where in everywhere the few make it bad for the majority. I would ask that we be left alone and let the private companies carry on as they have been allowed to, as far as I'm concerned, because a few people tend to dump stuff where they're not supposed to, does not mean that we should completely shut down a very, very good private company that supplies a very, very good service.
Thank you, Director Wilson, and I'd just like to remind everyone we've been doing pretty good so far. Let's stick to the resolution, or to the information that's before us. I see nodding around the room. Director
yeah, well,
Smith.
In that case, let's stick to the resolution that was there in the first place.
Director
anyway.
Smith, Director Wilson, the floor isn't yours, it's Director Smith's.
So I'd like to ask Mr. Marino, when it comes to the fires, the burning, was it also on ALR land? Because with ALR land, it's very different what's allowed burning. So were you also answering to look at ALR land during that time frame?
Mr. Morano, do you have a comment on the question?
Mr. Chair, yes, we did respond to ALR land. When a provincial burn ban is in place, it covers all lands. So we did respond to those. It wasn't just our bylaw, it was a provincial burn ban. So we worked in conjunction with the conservation officer service and natural resources officers. And because we're local, we can be a first responder and help them understand the rules. That, and in fact, there's a burn ban in place. Sometimes people don't know. And that's enough sometimes to get them to stop. If they are not going to cooperate, then we would, in that case, with ALR land, bring in the conservation officer or natural resource officer.
Thank you. And just sort of in a final comment, and I think that people did notice that there was very good air quality in comparison to previous years, and that's despite the fact that a lot of people still don't understand the venting index and the requirement for consulting that in advance of any burning that they do. But in regards to the report that we have before us, is there any more comment on R3? Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I'm curious about the noise complaints. What kind of noise complaints, Mr. Morano?
Mr. Morano.
Sorry, what was the question again?
What kind of noise complaint?
Just a broad range. Presumably people were home more often because of COVID and heard daily noises that maybe they weren't used to, possibly. But certainly there was a slight increase, and enforcement files didn't decrease during COVID. They either stabilized or increased, to be honest. So I can't explain why, but that's just the way it turned out.
Any further questions in regards to this report? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Morano. Now we go to R4, and with R4, that might be Mr. Dennison, or who's handling the critical street lighting report? We got Mr. Dennison. I thought it might be you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just sat down in my chair after sneaking down the hallway for a moment, so it just worked out fine. Our street lighting policy is ancient and needs updating. We had a particular episode last year where a number of members or a number of homeowners in a senior strata development in Mill Bay asked for a critical street light, citing various safety concerns. Street light was put in, and then we received another petition from other people, but a larger number of other people in the same strata requesting its removal. And that reminded us that, this really needs to be looking at. So we have gone out and considered other policies in other places and brought that information in, and now have a revised policy for your consideration. In the old policy, the applicant contacted BC Hydro to make arrangements, and that's not the case at all now. It has to be staff. There was a direct role for the electoral area directors in whose area the request was made. But we think it'd be better to handle that by staff and then bring it to committee. We've moved the standard up for the request to a 2/3 majority instead of really kind of a random number, an unknown number. So a 2/3 majority of homes within the area. And also on the policy, we've specified some of our major considerations that they ought to be considering when requesting a critical street light. So we think between all that, it's better than it was, and we'd like to recommend that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dennison. I've got myself and Director Yanni DiNardo on the list for questions, and Director Nicholson. Anyone else?
I was going to move the recommendation.
Well, hang on just a sec. We've got Director Salmon as well. And
speaking from a, sorry.
Hang on just a sec. Before we go on to speakers, I was first, but I just want to note that we're nearing the end of our regular part of our meeting, and I want to just notify anyone that wants to ask a question of the chair prior to the end of the open session of the meeting to send your questions through to Ms. Legault at legislative services, all one word, at cbrd.bc.ca. And because we have a closed session, we will, when we're completed, we finish question period, we will be resolving right into the closed session. So here's your plenty of warning to get your questions in. My first question, as I was on the list, I went through to Ms. Legault or Mr. Dennison. Given that there has been dollars expended in installation of lights and removal of lights, have we nailed down what we actually mean by two-thirds petition? Because I'm just envisioning that you'll get somebody go out with a clipboard and say they've got two-thirds of the people in the community when how do we verify that?
I'll do that one, Mr. Chairman. It's a little bit tricky. It's in the report and it's kind of a background consideration, but and the thing is, it's different every time to some extent, right? The geography, the placement of homes, it can be all, there's going to always have to be a certain amount of judgment, but the kind of rule of thumb we're thinking is within 100 meters of the critical location. So, you know, within that 100 meters, you basically go through and collect up signatures from two-thirds of the homeowners or property owners of various sorts. It could be business too or whatever that are within that area. So that's kind of the rule of thumb we were thinking of. And just one item of clarity, Mr. Chairman, there actually isn't capital cost to us to install these critical streetlights. BC Hydro covers that cost, and then they charge us the electrical usage from then on, thereafter. So we don't put up money for the installation, but then annually we pay for the electricity.
But we have staff who process this, so that was more my concern. So I'm going to actually follow up because, you know, I once again, I think this goes to the 100-meter works, but there is a difference between like a petition form that we use to get consent on taking an action on behalf of taxing the taxpayer versus somebody drawing up something on their home computer and going around and saying, okay, well, here's my 69% of the people within 100 meters, please go ahead and do this. So I just would like to have a little bit more certainty than just, you know, here's a petition and we think we've got the number. So I just bring that up. I don't know if Ms. Legault has any thoughts. It was kind of a spur of the moment question, but any input on this?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I really see that there's two types of petitions that we could be talking about, and one is to establish a new service, and there's very specific legislative requirements around that. In this case, these are established services, and it's more of an opinion poll to get neighborhood buy-in for installing a new light within the existing service.
Okay, fair enough. I'll come back at the end again. Director Yanni Donardo.
I was just going to move the recommendation. I didn't know if there was more speakers.
Yes, there is more speakers. I'll come back to you. Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I am wondering about, I'm thinking about the Coxsila Business Park area, and we've had a request from one of the stores there to provide some lighting for staff so that when they walk to their cars late at night, it is safer. So I am wondering if that will be adequately covered by these criteria that you put under number 2 in the policy, Mr. Dennison.
Mr. Dennison.
Well, I would say that in this case, the potential hazards element would be, I mean, the fundamental purpose of our critical street lighting services are safety, right? That's the main thing, the main reason we have them. Now that can be a little bit, you know, there's a fair bit of judgment as to, you know, what constitutes a hazard and what doesn't. I think in this case, you know, for their employees, that might be a consideration, especially I would say if there's also public risk, for example, people coming to the store or doing other things in that area, and you know, there was, I'm not sure what the risk would be, traffic or perhaps something else that might constitute a risk in that area, then that would be a stronger, you know, that would be certainly a case then. You know, would there be trip and fall risks, you know, because it's dark? Would there be, you know, risks because of traffic or you know, collision with a car or something of that nature? It's usually most of the time most of the critical streetlights have been put in place for a very typical situation would be neighborhood people getting to their mailboxes, right, and crossing a busy road, getting their mailbox. So the cars do have lights, headlights when you travel, but still people feel that, there may not be stopping distance, maybe it's at a curve or something, those kinds of things. Sometimes we even had the RCMP request a critical street light because of what they see as a risk to people. So, if that's the case for this particular location, that might well meet that standard. But there is going to have to always be a certain degree of judgment on the part of the committee when these are considered, for sure, because it's not absolute standard.
Follow up, Director Nicholson.
I was just wondering if we could change D to read potential pedestrian and other hazards.
Well, we don't, I believe we don't have a resolution on the floor yet, and we were having some general discussion. Is that correct, Ms. Legault?
That's correct.
Okay, so can you hold that thought? I'd like to go through the speakers list and see where we get. And I just have added Director Smith to the list. Director Salmon, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So just a couple of things I wondered if were considered. One is the type of streetlights. I think there's a newer type that try to just direct the light at the ground so there'd be less light pollution. And then secondly, generally dark sky communities, I don't know if we have any in our OCP or how that works, but if you've considered that at all.
Mr. Dennison, please.
Thank you. Yes, so BC Hydro has come out with flat plate streetlights that direct the lighting much more downward than previously. We had very little choice. There was only a choice in wattage before, and they were utterly standard. So now they have, and one would think that BC Hydro, interested in conservation issues, would be leading the way. But anyway, they now have come up with some LED and flat plate options that are much better with respect to light pollution. So that's certainly the case. And then, sorry, what was the second question again?
Dark sky community.
Oh, dark sky. Yeah, that would be something that we would report on if that's something that's in any sense official. Like certainly if it's an OCP or something of that nature, we would report on that in the report to say that should be an awareness. Potentially, again, as I say, there's no escape to a certain degree of judgment. It's possible that there may be a situation that's high risk, and despite it being a dark sky community, the directors may want to override that concern to say, well, if the safety concern is a bigger one. But we would certainly report that information if there was anything to indicate that in the staff report.
Just
follow up, Director Salmon.
Yeah, just does anyone know, do we have dark sky in any of our OCPs now?
Director Yanni DiNardo does.
Just the one?
Yep.
Okay.
I have Director Smith and myself. Director Smith, go ahead.
Thank you. So in the report, in the background, it says that except areas G and H. So in the policy, it doesn't indicate that we're not in the policy or so can you just clarify, should the policy actually indicate that not G and H? Because every time somebody reads a policy and it is explicit as to which areas are included, it works much better than the area H or area G getting phone calls saying there's this policy, but we're not part of it. And then it doesn't say that. So can you just clarify whether it should indicate that?
Who wants that one, Ms. Legault or Mr. Dennison? Mr. Dennison, go. Oh, you passing it on. Ms. Legault on the crafting of the policy.
That's a simple clarification that can be made.
That good enough, Director Smith? Make sure it's clear. Okay, I've got myself on the list next. So I'm sorry to go back to that issue of flip-flopping on critical street lighting, but I have absolute confidence in the the way staff have dealt with these issues in the past, and you know, it's a rarity that we would have a flip-flop like we had in that area, but is there any merit in there being a minimum time frame between a installation and consideration of a removal, so that we're not sort of having dueling petitions and requests for removal and installation and back and forth? Or is there any merit in contemplating that? I think it's only happened once or twice in the 12 years I've been here. Mr. Dennison?
Yeah, in any significant sense, that's only happened the one time last year. We have had individuals later on, say somebody moves into an area and they don't like a particular streetlight. You know, sometimes that streetlight may have been there for you know, a decade or two, and somebody's moved in and doesn't want it, wants it out. But we've never had. There's only the one time that we've actually had a petition for that. It's hard to say. You know, I would think that if you've had a 2/3, you know, 2/3 indication from at least 2/3 of the property owners within an affected area, they're saying we want this light here, that you know, presumably that's be very difficult for somebody else to then get more than 2/3, or you know, again from the same area, right? So I don't know how that would come about. I think we would, you know, my feeling is that once that 2/3 standard has been met, that threshold has been met, then it's essentially, we would consider it a permanent installation.
Okay, fair enough. Enough said. Thank you, Mr. Dennison. So I'll go back to Director Nicholson. It's a very simple recommendation. Is there something that you wanted to change within the recommendation or within the body of the report that would significantly change the recommendation? Director Nicholson, go ahead.
I would just like to clarify number. Just a sec. Lost it now.
I think it was D, that potential pedestrian and other hazards.
Thank you. Yes, I would just like the wording to include pedestrian so there's greater clarity.
Does anybody have any difficulty with that? Like, I think that's just direction to staff, and I'm going to ask that if that's included, that it's got to go to the board. So can everybody remember to look for it when it goes to the board? And I'm looking for a recommendation for the motion for the recommendation that's moved by Director Yanni DiNardo, seconded by Director Wilson. The resolution is that that it be recommended to the board that the revised critical street lighting critical locations policy be approved. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Are there any opposed? None opposed, the motion carries. We have R5. Is everybody still ready to go ahead? Or do you want a quick break? We have been here now, well over an hour and a half. I think we should take a couple of quick minutes. This may be a few minutes in discussion. So it's 3:13. Please be back at 3:20. Off and turns it back on, and the whole thing jumbles around. And you staff are where directors were, and so. I think it's time to pitter patter get back at her. Director Nicholson, please rejoin us as soon as you can, and that will thank you everyone for coming back. And that brings us to item R5, which is a report from the Parks and Trails Division, and I gather we've got a couple of staff ready to engage on this one. So first up, Mr. Farquhar, are you going to be taking this one?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and Committee. Yes. So the report before you is providing an update on our community engagement process thus far for Saltaire Centennial Park. Saltaire Centennial Park is one of a handful of parks the regional district manages that I think is truly a multi-use park with many facilities in the park built over the years, from tennis courts, playgrounds, sport courts, ball fields, washrooms, and picnic shelter, dating back to the late 70s. And hand in hand with the CVRD endeavoring along with our asset management program, we've certainly recognized that all these wonderful facilities built in Saltaire Centennial Park, though we continue to maintain them, are getting older in age. And certainly looking forward in the coming decades, we want to understand from the community at large where they see their priorities moving forward in terms of what the park has now, what they'd like to see kept, updated, as well as perhaps other park amenities that currently don't exist in the community park added in the years to come as part of our annual budgeting for the park. So over the years 2018, 2019, as outlined in the report by Tanya Soroka, we've done some community engagement by way of in-park surveys in 2018 and a more broader invite for community engagement by way of surveys that people could fill out online or mail in that was done in 2019. And we had intended to go back to the community with a summary of this information this past spring, but due to a little matter, we were unable to hold a community meeting. And so at this point in time, the report before you provides a summary of that community engagement to date. And we're looking for some direction from the committee with respect to next steps. And next steps being, as outlined in the report, look to an online method or online platform that undertakes some further public engagement to better inform on revitalization of the plan, or alternatively, take the information that's been collected to date and use that to start preparing a revitalization plan for the community based on the input we've received. And by either process, we'd be also wanting to look at finding ways to get further input from our advisory commission in Saltaire as well. And that further public engagement would follow the board's public engagement policy and the public engagement guide and workbook toolkit that's been developed through our communications and engagement division. So at this time, staff are recommending that we look to do some further engagement by way of an online platform. And that's option one outlined in the report, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farquhar. So I will go to Director Smith, and I thought we had some other staff that were prepared to bring something to the table, but go to Director Smith first. And just before you comment, I just want to remind anyone that's watching that wants to pose a question in regards to anything on today's agenda to please do so through legislative services, all one word, at cbrd.bc.ca. The floor is yours, Director Smith.
Thank you. Thanks for the report. We've been waiting for the report for quite a while. It was disappointing that at the beginning of April, we were unable to have the Parks Commission actually receive it and have input from Mr. Farquhar to go over the report and have a discussion. That was April, and here we are at the end of July, almost into August. Some of the takeaways or some of the things I think that maybe some of the other directors may not know is in 2014, the CBRD board made a decision to purchase the Mount Brenton property, and it included the school building, but I don't want to talk about the building. We'll go there another day. But in the end, the property loan was put under the parks budget, and the parks budget over the last 5 years has shouldered $170,000, which means that these amenities within the Centennial Park, our trails that are multiple, our beach accesses, have not had that $170,000 available. So we have multiple areas that could use upgrades, and Centennial Park may or may not be part of that in the big picture. So the $170,000 has been a huge money. The land that is available to be added to Centennial Park will definitely benefit the community for a long time. And that's a great addition. One of the things is the park's asset management indicated that there was $132,000 in the report for the next 10-year plan. We're just getting our feet back on the ground as we finished paying off the loan last year. So we don't have spare money. I feel that we need to work within the budgets that we have. And the biggest takeaway out of the report that I found was at the very last page, where 70% of the Saltaire people included in the report, they don't support tax increase. So to accomplish a lot of the things that would possibly be looked at just isn't within the budget at the particular time. And if people aren't thinking that we should increase. So I think that it's really important that the Saltaire Parks Commission actually have a look at the document and have an opportunity to meet, discuss it, and think of how whether we should move forward in online communication or whether we should just put this on hold for a while we work through some other things with the budgets of upgrading or looking at some of the other areas within the Saltaire Parks budget. So I would like to recommend that the Saltaire Centennial Park Revitalization Survey report be referred to the Area G Saltaire Community Park Advisory Commission to provide a recommendation on the community engagement process.
You could certainly move that. I thought we might have a little more discussion beforehand, but is there a seconder for the resolution? Seconded by Director Wilson. So any discussion on the item? I actually had a question for staff, but that's kind of moot now. So Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, this is from looking through the report. It's a huge undertaking, and there's a lot of money involved here. And I think the request by Director Smith to have this put back to the Parks Commission is very reasonable. If this were my area, I would be asking the same thing. And to have this kind of input from the Parks, the Commission of the area would, to me, be a very, very reasonable step.
So I think I'll put myself on the list next. I read the report and I don't see anywhere in there where there isn't any intention to engage the Parks Commission at the appropriate time for their deliberation on the public input that comes in. I view the request that has been put before us that obviously isn't on the floor as a very sort of administrative operational request of us is to go out and to engage the public more. But I'm hearing from Director Smith's comments that there may be a doubt as to whether or not there will be any activity go forward on this as at all based on budget constraints. So I guess I would like to have some clarification as to what we're sending back to the commission to actually contemplate, what we're asking, what advice we're asking them for. Is the advice, do we want to continue, or are we actually asking them to have input in how the online inquiry and surveys are going to be done? Because we've got professional staff that follow our organizational guidelines as to how we proceed with engagement. So maybe through to Director Smith, what are we referring it back to them for? What are we asking them? Director Smith?
Well, first, the commissions haven't been able to meet. This is the first opportunity that they will actually have to meet and look at this report that they've been waiting for, so that they can see what the report says, talk amongst themselves about the report, and then look at the two options for moving forward with community engagement. They're part of the community. They know the community. We have lots of communication issues involving online type items within Saltaire. You've seen how I struggle with online participation in the meetings. So I think it's important that before we head off onto that community engagement, whether it's the staff going and making their own making decisions based on what came out of the report. The report has 139 Saltaire residents that have participated. Some of them could have participated twice in 2018 and in 2019, which even if you use the 139 people from Saltaire residents, you would find that that's less than 10%. We have a North Saltaire, we have a South Saltaire, and a Central Saltaire. If you talk to some of the people in the North, they don't even know that Centennial Park exists. And if you talk to the people in the South, they live there, they have their beach access, they do their properties, a lot of them are on the ocean front already. They do different recreation than going to Centennial Park. A lot of the users of Centennial Park are from outside of Centennial Park. If you look at the data that we received recently, it indicated that Centennial Park usage had dropped by approximately, I don't know, 4,000 people. So the usage in Centennial Park between January and the end of June was 51%, which indicates that there's a lot of ball players that are not there. But if you go and you actually look at the ball players, the majority of them aren't from Saltaire. The people that come and play tennis, the majority of them aren't from Saltaire. We might have 10 people that actually play tennis that are from Saltaire. And the children that use the playground, I go through that park probably 5 times a week, different times, different things to actually see who's utilizing the park. And you talk to the parents with their children in the park, and quite often they're from Ladysmith or they're from Chemainus. And majority of the demographics in Saltaire is older people that have maybe a grandchild that comes once in a while that they go over. We are getting more families, so the playground is a really big priority for whether we move along and where we are in that life cycle. But I think it's really important. Our commissions, we have our commissions. We should be utilizing our commissions, and this is a perfect opportunity to utilize their knowledge of the local community and have their input on what they think would be the best way to proceed with community engagement.
Thank you for that, Director Smith. As a follow-up, and this will be through to staff. So as Mr. Farquhar knows, I've just recently gone through a park redevelopment in the center of my community, and the process that was underway, that was undertaken in our community, and I'm not saying it's a template, but the commission made a decision that there would be a redevelopment of a certain park area. We turned it over to staff. Staff provided the engagement. I don't even think we had 2% of our community engaged, but we developed the plan. That our staff developed the plan, came back to the commission. The plan was reviewed by the commission and recommended that the director take it to the board for approval and endorsement. So I guess my question is, this question is about community engagement. So Mr. Farquhar, do you anticipate there being a net benefit to asking the commission about the nature of, because the question, it sounds to me like, is it's being referred to them for comment on how we engage to get more information, because my understanding is this report is draft, it's not complete. So can you provide me some clarity as to what the staff would receive in the way of benefit from a referral to the commission?
So, Mr. Chair, as you rightly note, we are in a process with the Saltaire community to develop a revitalization plan for Saltaire Centennial Park. And I believe that we have our manager of communications and engagement with us as well. But with respect to what staff can apply, we work under the policies of the board, and the board has a public engagement policy to which we have a program developed in terms of how the regional district will engage with our communities. And I would look to the committee in terms of, is the committee wishing to get some input from one of your advisory commissions in terms of your policy and program around public engagement? Otherwise, because the application of what we've been doing would be in line with the board's policy. So certainly if it's a question of whether or not the commission feels that some additional community engagement from their perspective would bring additional value from the broader community, definitely would appreciate and would take that feedback from the commission, as I'm sure the committee would as well. And so if that's the intent of the referral, wonderful. Otherwise, we would be engaging with the advisory commission, as we did with Electoral Area F with Central Park, in developing a plan there as well in terms of the overall process. It's just that this current process has taken longer. There's been some delays along the way that have been the cause of nobody, but we're hopeful that we can look to work with the community, work with the advisory commission, and ultimately bring back a plan for consideration by the committee and the board. So I don't know if our manager of communications and engagement has any further to add from a staff perspective, but that's what I can share at this time, Mr. Chair.
Well, thank you. I'll go to Director Wilson next to it, his hand up, and then see if Mr. Schumacher wants to wade in. Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you know, I'm easily confused. And right now, these waters are being muddied by... as far as I understand it, all Director Smith is asking is that the APC be involved as we go forward. Now, is that correct? Because to me, it's a very simple question. Are the APCs going to be involved? Because I would like, let me say it again, if it was my area, I would want my APC involved. So question is, do you intend to include the APCs or not? Thank you.
Mr. Farquhar, but just before you get into it, I think it was fully detailed in the report that you plan to have at least a couple of opportunities to go over the engagement and the plan with the staff. But please go ahead, Mr. Farquhar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For clarity, it would not be the APC that we'd be engaging with.
That Parks Commission, sorry.
The Advisory Park Commission. And yes, they will be involved in the process. It has been planned all along. So thank you.
Good, thank you. That's basically all I needed to know. Thank you.
Director Smith.
Thank you. I think it's really important that the Community Parks Commission is the one that has an opportunity to give feedback on having this communication within our community. We've seen some drawbacks from how we had communication with the community involving the HOCP meetings. There's a lot of different things that are unique to Saltaire, and so I think that the feedback would be beneficial from the Parks Advisory Commission, and that's what I'm asking for, is it to go to the Parks Commission, that they be included in making these decisions of how possibly the feedback on the communication would be strengthened at this time, to make sure that when you've had a survey twice and you only have 139 people in your community respond, you want to figure out how you can communicate and strengthen it. And you may, with the commissions, be able to come up with the feedback that will help strengthen the future communication for the community in regards to this revitalization.
Thank you. I was going to go to Mr. Schumacher and then Director Acton and Kuhn. Mr. Schumacher, could you provide us some context as to what our engagement process would be at this point?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, I'm not joining you via video. This is in my daycare and day camp pickup hour, so I'm joining you by phone. I guess I believe I heard the referral motion was for the APCs to discuss the communications and engagement process. and I believe I heard Director Smith talk about whether or not they wanted to even go forward with further engagement at this time on the revitalization strategy. But then I also think that she had just mentioned that they wanted to discuss the actual process of engagement with the APCs prior to continuing on in the process, a further engagement process. So I wasn't sure exactly, or I still don't have clarity as to what the nature of the referral was going to be. But I guess I would just say broadly that, the appropriateness of referring an item to commission for input on a board approved or a sanctioned process that's informed by a policy or strategy. I'm just not sure if that's the best thing, as this committee is made up of members who, are intimately familiar with with our policy around public engagement and the strategy and staff toolkit that accompanies that for the planning and execution of it. So if the intention was to ask the commission whether their input or whether the input that was collected to date was satisfactory and they thought reflected the broad desires and ideas of the community at large, I don't think I'd have any concerns with that. But I'm unsure as to why the EASC directors would not be suitable body to make that determination. And I think from my perspective that the work that our Parks and Trail staff has done over the last couple of years to engage residents around the future of community parks at large, including the Saltaire Centennial Park, is very much in line with the revised policy and strategy that was rolled out in 2019. So I guess I would just want some more clarity around what the referral motion and process was going to be around that.
Thank you, Mr. Schumacher. I will go to Director Acton next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to support the director of the area. It is her Parks Commission and her park. And in the end, I will support the director, but I do feel like she's making a big mistake here. You're going to add an extra layer of delay. 130 something people's not bad. Our whole parks master plan for Area B was made with 120 people's input. So it sounds like you've had quite a pretty good input already, and to send that net out to the broader community right away is going to allow you to work on your asset management for that park and to determine what the community at large sees in it. And I don't think that bigger net ever hurts, because we get into our little silos and there's no reason why your commission's not in their own little silo. So tossing your net a little wider, I think, would be a really great plan. But if you want to continue down this road, you have my support.
Thank you, Director Kuhn.
I understand what Director Smith is after. There seems to be some doubt as to if the community would be willing to pay for the costs for, let's say, substantial improvements in the park. The trouble I have with her proposal is that if the Parks Commission is faced with the question, okay, what do we want to do? On as big a park as this is, there'll be all kinds of different answers, and it'll be very difficult to get them all concise as to, let's say, a recommendation to staff. My indication would be the way I would like to see it proceed. If I was the area director, I would say, I would go to the Parks Department. I would say, look, yes, there might be a requirement for renewal of some of the amenities, but we don't have the budget for huge improvements. So please come back with a recommendation based on a very small budget, because it appears to me that our community is not going to go along with a huge expense. And then wait until staff get back. And then the Parks Commission has all the opportunity to comment on recommendations come back from the Parks Commission, from the Parks Department. And I think that would be, it would be more focused then, and then you actually have a base as to where you want to go and what should be changed.
Thank you, Director Kuhn. Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I think what's the report and the information we have before us is really asking us whether the work that's been done to date reflects the broader community wishes or not. So should there be more outreach, or should we just go ahead and develop an asset management strategy for this park? So I think it's really timely to take it back to the Parks Commission, because they're in a best position to look at this information and decide if what we heard in the survey of the 122 Saltaire residents reflects, generally speaking, the broader community or not. They're in a good position to provide that input. So I think that would be advice well taken if it went back to the Parks Commission at this point.
So I'll just wait in here one last time, and before we go to a vote, and we all know what the nature of the resolution is. It seemed to me that it was very clear in the report that the Parks Commission was going to be playing a key role in later input and decision making as to what would the advice be to come to the board. But just to relate to you the experience that we went through, park staff organized, and I know we can't have a public meeting, but the commission weighed in, gave us ideas in the redevelopment of Central Park and Area F, and we ended up going to the community, having that extra meeting on a Saturday. And what ended up happening is a 9-year-old boy wandered into the meeting, and the first thing out of his mouth was, "Where's the zip line?" Now, we had no plans to put a zip line into the redevelopment of the park. And now we have a zip line, and it's the most popular feature probably in the Cowichan Lake area. So, you know, more communication is better and broader is better. But if I see the sense the director seems to think the best place to go is to have her Parks Commission review the work that's already been done. I think it's a good question of getting out there and casting the net as far as we can. So with that, the resolution on the floor is to essentially refer the matter for consultation to the Parks Commission on further engagement. Is everyone clear? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. That will go through to the board on the 9th of September. Next item. I believe we're on UB2, is that correct? Thank you. Report Parks Trails Division in regards to Parks and Trails invasive plant management from the June 24th meeting, and who's taking that one on from staff?
Mr. Chair, this one is for information.
Oh, okay. So, directors, questions for staff on this? I think we had a crack at this at Director Annie Donardo, go ahead.
Thank you. I just had a question on the invasive species, and just wanted to speak to that. And I just had all kinds of community, and I think I brought it up before. The complaint was one of the invasive species, which we all know about, is the Himalayan blackberry, and they disappeared out of all of, like, they are completely gone out of the parks. And we wondered, community was asking me, that's food security. There's always a debate about the Himalayan blackberry, but they were asking me why we didn't go to another invasive, or maybe the ivy, but the for food security for animals and different reasons. We're wondering why it was the blackberry was the one that was really taken out of every park, because there's a lot of spaces where it wasn't actually hurting the parks at all, or it was on the way to a walk or something. So I'm just curious on why the blackberry was chosen.
Mr. Giddon, welcome.
Hi, I might be labeled as Tanya. I'm using her laptop right now in the office. Through the chair, yeah, but the priority is set through the province of what species are invasive. Blackberry is labeled as a priority species for us. The reason why we target blackberry in our parks is because it does impact natural habitat, and it does expand and sort of impact other really important habitats quickly. So it can really change the landscape dramatically. And so it's a species that can really, ultimately change the feel of the park and also change the biodiversity in a park relatively quickly. I have had comments regarding food security, and I know a lot of people like to pick blackberries, and there's multiple opportunities to pick blackberries all over the valley. However, if we can focus on our parklands and make sure that they still have healthy habitats, there's still opportunity to pick blackberries elsewhere. It's just, for parks, we manage parks for people, but we also manage them for habitats. So that's why we target them within our parks.
Follow-up, Director Yanni Donato?
I guess there is debate on blackberry being habitat as well, so the food security and habitat. But the spaces that it was taking out of, it was not taking over any other parts of where people are in these parks, and a lot of the parks that were taken out in Cowichan Bay. So I just wondered, like, that versus ivy that kills trees. Anyway, it just happened to be that I did receive all kinds of complaints, and I wanted to just clarify that. Thank you.
And I think you've done so very well. And once again, that's one of those where, staff are doing the best to operate within the rules that we've sort of set down for them. And I think you've raised that well. And I think they've heard clearly that we don't want to see massive removals in our parks, parklands that are, regularly used by our residents. So I think there's a fine balance, and staff have heard us. Any other questions around the invasive species report? Director Nicholson?
I happen to think that invasive species are a pretty critical issue for maintaining the ecological integrity of our parks system. So I guess I am wondering, we've got this program, which is great. We do some invasive species management. It seems to me that it's very much driven by the amount of budget that we have, as opposed to maybe the risk that a particular species is posing to our park system. And I'm wondering if staff could comment a little bit on whether we are investing enough to deal with the high risk areas, and is there a way that we could maybe develop some policy around how this is handled? Because, currently we all do our own budgeting in area-based budgeting for community parks.
I don't know if that's Mr. Giddon or whether it's, like he's smiling, so you can have it.
Through the chair, yeah, it's been a challenge. I mean, this program is relatively new. It started in 2013, so in the last few years, every electoral area has been included in the program, and it's hard to initially budget for the program because no one really understands the full breadth of what is necessary. We initially start with an inventory to see what's out in all our parks. We use the priority plant species to guide us on which priority plants we need to address first, so they have the higher priority plants, and we apply the funds to the highest priority plants first. We don't, the lower priority plants like blackberry and broom, we get to those in areas where, say, there's high interface with people, or we've already knocked off all the highest priority plants. In some areas, the budgets have been appropriate. In other areas, they're not, and it's sort of working through those. And there's definitely gaps, and it's really up to the local area directors to determine how those budgets expand or decrease over time, and that's just being in tune with the program going forward. I mean, I think the program itself has been successful with the budgets at hand, and it's moving forward as we expected.
Thank you, Mr. Gooden. Follow-up, Director Nicholson.
Thank you. Well, I'm just wondering if it would be worthwhile if staff could produce a report that sort of documented areas that are kind of falling behind or that are not being adequately addressed, so that, you know, we have the whole picture to look at when we come into this budget season.
Mr. Farquhar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If staff can certainly take a look at the program, where we're at for 2020, and bring forward some considerations for the committee specific to each electoral area. And for those electoral areas where from the program's implementation, additional effort would be worthy of consideration, the committee and the board ultimately can make those kind of decisions as part of the 2021 budget process. So we can certainly do that.
But Mr. Farquhar, I gotta pose the question because, like, if we don't already know it and the public don't already know it, like, staff are going full out on the budget right now, and it happens to be the busiest time of the year for park staff because they're out there carrying out the wishes that we've already given them. So, you know, I'm just wondering if this might be an appropriate activity for the off season because I know what the status is in my community parks. So I don't need a report from Mr. Farquhar. I don't know about the rest of you feel, but this could be a broader reaching thing for, you know, the overall area, but I certainly don't need to have staff pulling away from other activities that they're doing right now in parks to give me a report on the invasive species in my area, whether or not I'm falling behind or whether or not I'm putting appropriate dollars towards that. So what's the wish of the committee? Do you want to have staff go and put that on their list of work that they need to do, or are we fine with the status quo? I turn to you and ask you what your pleasure is. Director Acton.
Well, to frankly answer your question, I'm happy with status quo because we've said to staff we want to keep our budget as low as possible. And we have lots of volunteer groups that work on this kind of thing. So I think the program's working well, and I'm happy to leave it for Area B for right now. We are just still over the moon that Parks is spending time building playgrounds like at Old Mill Park. So get out there and check out our new park. And we don't mind if you're from Saltaire or anywhere else. We like everybody using our parks.
Good little bit of shameless promotion there, Director Acton. I love it. So I got lots of nodding when it was like, let's stay with the status quo. So unless somebody wants to try a positive motion, then Director Smith.
Yeah, we welcome everyone to the Saltaire Parks, all our trails and our beach accesses. They're multi-use from lots of areas, and we appreciate the people that come and use them. One of the things that I'm wanting to know is, where are we at with the volunteer program involved? You know, I went out and spent a day pulling invasive species, and then I replanted. So where does that program fit into this invasive species? Are we winning or losing when we're utilizing volunteers?
Okay, fair question. Maybe I shouldn't have encouraged Director Acton's shameless promotion, but maybe we can cut that off and stick to questions that are appropriate for the community's concern. Right? No, fair.
Me?
You've asked the question. I'm posing the question.
To allow certain things to happen at the meeting and inappropriate comments from directors, that's not appropriate. And I'm calling you on that conduct. So I'm asking a question.
And I was about to reiterate your question for you.
I'm asking a question. If the volunteer program where we're out having people doing the invasive species is actually working, whether we're making progress or we're not making progress. I had a question. Thank you.
Mr. Farquhar.
Mr. Chair, I happily note that our volunteer program does make progress with our invasive program, which is inclusive of both removal and restoration. However, in light of the CBRD board's approved restoration of services program due to COVID-19, all volunteer activities have been on hold since March, but we're hopeful to be able to reactivate some in the fall as part of our phase 3 under the program, but we'll be reviewing that in early fall. But honestly, we're looking to re-engage our wonderful collection of volunteers as soon as we can, both with the invasive program and other activities, including trail building. And I know our volunteers are keen to get back to work too. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farquhar. Seeing no other hands up on invasive species, we'll go to UB3. And just to give you some information as to, there was a fairly quick development on this one. I'd asked that this be added to the agenda last week, and Mr. Carruthers received a request and a very short turnaround time on minister meetings and topics. So I had consulted with a couple of you, and a number of you had brought items forward over the previous meeting or two. I'm going to turn to Mr. Carruthers. He has more details as to what was required around that, and perhaps you could report out what's been done to this point.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So we have a deadline of August 4th in order to make our request for minister meetings for the upcoming UBCM conference in the third week of September. The committee and the board indicated two ministers, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, to specifically discuss the Saltair water treatment system, and also wanted to talk to the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure about a number of electoral area issues. Working with Chair Morrison for the ASC, we came up with three topics: active transportation plans for electoral areas, and seeking some guidance from the minister with respect to how we will go about developing those plans in a comprehensive way to reflect all the needs in our electoral areas, and so that we can further that program on the ground. We talked about discussing paving priorities for electoral areas, ensuring an equitable distribution of paving work throughout the electoral areas in the CBRD, as well as some discussion around industrial debris deposited on provincial highways. And those are issues specific to the Cowichan Lake area, as well as down in the South Cowichan, and our soil operations and facilities in the Shawnigan area. So those are the three topics. We're only allowed three. So those are the three, and working with ESC Chair Morrison that we're putting forward. So I turn it back to you, Chair Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Carruthers. I see Director Yanni DiNardo put her hand up. Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a question through you to Mr. Carruthers. If I would be wanting to also speak to Ministry of Transportation or be involved. Is there certain directors that are chosen to attend these meetings, or is there a limit, or how does that work?
No, that is essentially the call of the committee as to who's going to attend. I think we do try to keep a reasonable number of attendees, albeit this is going to be a different format this year with the virtual meetings. But it's not uncommon for us to attend with the chair, a committee chair, and a couple of directors, particularly those directors that may have an interest in particular topics. So I leave that to the committee.
And I will note that I did produce a list of half a dozen items that I knew were of interest. One was lowering speed limits in electoral areas and residential areas and the likes. But a number of those things have already been addressed by UBCM. And then Mr. Carruthers gave me the news that they were only allowing us to fill in 3 fields for areas of discussion. So I tried to, put forward things that were of a broad nature that covered a lot of our concerns. I should say that I happen to have had a meeting with two MOTI officials yesterday in regards to the little beach and tubing up in the Cowichan Lake area, and had mentioned that one of the items that we were putting forward was likely to be around a strategy for active transportation and creating connecting communities and the likes, and from a rural perspective, and it was actually thought of that would be really something that perhaps the ministry might want to sink their teeth into, because it seems to be a broadly supported topic across a number of regional districts. So you've heard the topics that have been put forward. Some didn't quite make the grade. We could only do 3, and we would look to whatever, including whoever was interested, depending on what format that we'll have for a minister meeting when it happens. And I'm sure Mr. Carruthers will inform us as to how that will roll out. Is there anything that we absolutely missed that you think should rise above the 3 that have been put forward? Not seeing anything at this point. If something comes up, if there's something that's urgent, we're not meeting for a month, but please approach me or Mr. Carruthers if you think there should be some other information or other topic of discussion brought forward with the minister. So having said that, that's UB3. I do not believe there is any new business, and we have made the call for questions for question period to the chair. Keep in mind, we do have a closed session coming up immediately after question period. So with that, I will go to Ms. Legault for questions from the public on today's meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first submission is from Susan Kaufman of Satlam. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Expressing thanks to the directors for supporting my public input submission. Regarding item UB1, could you provide clarity on the motion of referral as read by staff? The recommendation as per today's agenda was for referral to the Area EAPC. It is commendable that the applicant did make application, but also stated he had bought the tent prior to receiving approval from the CVRD. There was a concern that a number of tents have been erected without permits. Based on the comments today, what is the takeaway? That the Area E form and function is no longer valid, and so the CVRD will move to approve applications without, at least referring to the APC.
In regards, I'll take the last question first. I absolutely, that was not the takeaway that I got. I saw an applicant come forward, make application, attempt to engage in the process. He walked through the front door, didn't try and sneak in through the back door. I think we become aware that there are other structures that may not be compliant and may not have received approval in advance. So I didn't have that takeaway. Ms. Legault, could you read the first question that was something to do with what the resolution was as printed or finally adopted?
So it's requesting clarification on the motion of referral that was contained on the agenda order page, which was the recommendation that was passed on July 22nd. And so the recommendation on the agenda was for referral to the Area EAPC.
Oh, that's really quite clear, and it's that was a recommendation to the board. The resolution hadn't gone to the board. The item was back on the agenda. The resolution made of 2 weeks ago, it was duly moved and seconded that it be rescinded. A new resolution was put forward, which was, I believe, the initial staff recommendation, and that was adopted.
And a second section on this question period submission is on item R1. As stated in my public input, QEPs do make errors, and those errors are not always caught by Forest Lands and Natural Resource Operations. On a previous application, the Area EAPC did find several discrepancies within a QEP report. The discrepancies would have incurred unnecessary costs for the applicant and misidentified streams and waterways. In that instance, Flynn required corrective measures. Given the concerns expressed on this QEP report, will staff review the report for the benefit of the applicant and forest land and natural resource operations?
I do believe that staff made it very clear that they continue to work with the applicant, the province, and the QEP as this develops. I should note that it is not the responsibility or the jurisdiction of our staff to review the work and the integrity of a qualified environmental professional. There is a review and approval process that is administered by the province, and very clearly, I think our staff are taking a very proactive, as are the applicants, approach to ensuring that they do the right thing. So that's my answer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The final submission is from Bernard Yearlink. Dear Chair, for the proposed workshop on the soil deposit bylaw for CVRD directors that was mentioned in a previous CVRD board meeting, will the public be invited to attend? It is important that the public be invited for two reasons. Members of the public often think of questions that directors had not thought of, and two, the Ombudsperson of BC in 2012 document entitled Open Meetings Best Practices Guide for Local Governments states the public must have the opportunity to observe a material part of the decision-making process.
Ms. Legault, could I ask you to stop? The question's not appropriate to a committee. That was a resolution that was made at the board, and the legal workshop and the likes are not appropriate to be put to the chair of this committee. Is there any further information in his that pertains to the agenda that we have had today?
There is not, and there are no further submissions.
Thank you very much. I hope that Mr. Yearlink will contact either myself or the CVRD board chair in regards to his questions, but as I say, not appropriate to be posed at this meeting today. Having completed the question period, we are now on to a closed session, and I believe that we need a motion to close the meeting in accordance with Community Charter Part 4, Division 3, Section 90, and the subsections noted in the closed session. Moved by Director Yanni DiNardo, seconded by Director Kuhn. Any discussion on that resolution? Hearing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, the motion carries. Ms. Legault, are we checking out and checking back in?
That's correct. We have a separate meeting invitation.